Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. I'm Richard Luby, your host of Talk the Walk, a platform for individuals with disabilities and highlighting, celebrating the disability community. I utilize this platform as an opportunity for resources, individuals, companies, communities to showcase themselves and all the great work that they've been doing in the disability community. I myself have a disability, or I like to say the ability of cerebral palsy and OCD. So I said, what better way to really advocate not only for myself but other individuals to utilize this as a platform and a show to highlight all the different aspects of the great progress within the disability community. I'm very happy to say I have my second guest. Her name is Jennifer Kozek. She is an author, a mother, and a psychotherapist. So we're going to interview her and discuss all the ins and outs of what she does on a daily basis and what kind of drove her to write her new book. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, my second guest, Jennifer Kozek.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming in. So, I asked you to come in because I heard about the book that you wrote, and we have it here. We'll talk about that. But also, I just wanted to get an understanding of, the first thing I heard is you're a psychotherapist. You hear that, and I feel like you needed to go to school for like 47 years.
Yeah, it was quite a journey. It's a 60-credit master's program. You have to do postgraduate hours. It was a lot of work, but I love it so much that didn't really feel like it,
Yeah.
I just love what I'm doing, so it's all worth it.
And that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
When you love what you do, you enjoy it, it goes by.
Definitely.
Now, can you just give me a quick introduction of people that don't know, the audience that doesn't know?
Yeah.
What is a psychotherapist? What do they do?
Well, I treat individuals, children, sometimes couples, sometimes families with numerous disabilities, more mental health disabilities such as OCD, ADHD, depression, anxiety, and the gamut of mental health disorders that are, being treated right now by psychiatrists such as myself, psychologists, and psychiatrists.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now that you say OCD, I myself have OCD, so you might be able to slip my card after the show.
Yeah.
I might need your assistance.
Yeah.
One thing that tends to happen is a lot of people that get into a field like this, there's a personal connection or some type of life situation that occurred to make them kind of gravitate to that. Was there anything along those lines for you?
Yeah, actually, I grew up in a family that I was actually the caretaker of. I had a mother who had some issues and a brother that had special needs, actually. So I was always the caretaker in my family. So that sort of like drove me to want to take care of others. And then, the book kind of came about, when I had my own son, who was also exhibiting some of the similar symptoms as some of my clients. So that's what got me investigating alternative treatments to treat ADHD, OCD, depression, anxiety, because this was a 5-year-old kid that I was afraid was going to need to be put on medication.
Yeah, great segue. So you mentioned that you had a personal connection being the caretaker in your family, and then you went to school, you got your degree in the field to work with mental health, and I'm guessing it really prepared you for what was to come, to having a son, and you said on the spectrum, correct?
Yeah, it's interesting. I sort of always knew ever since I was about 10 years old that I was going to help people. So, I kind of knew I didn't know what I was going to be doing. I also knew at some point that I was going to write a book.
Okay.
And I also thought, if anyone was going to have a special needs child, it would be me. Because, for whatever reason, I thought I was going to be able to handle it, or I was going to be able to help them. So somewhere deep down, I sort of knew this was all coming to me. And I don't know if I invited it in or if I just had intuition and knew from a very young age that I would be doing something like this.
Well, it sounds like you have a very lucky kid.
Yeah.
A very prepared mom.
Yeah.
So kind of let's dive into the book. The book is entitled Healing Without Hurting.
Right.
And I want to kind of understand, obviously you mentioned because you have a son on the spectrum that it kind of drove you to write this. You already knew you were going to write a book, but let's dive into the book. Exactly what does it highlight and who's it for?
Okay, well, the book is really for parents. It's written by a mom for a mom. It's very easy to read. But being a clinician as well, I've actually been working the circuit and teaching, doing workshops with other therapists and teaching them to teach the families and the parents. So, the book is really for anybody that's working with anybody with a mental disability or any type of OCD, ADHD, special needs children, autistic children really need to read this book.
Would you recommend teachers too?
Absolutely. Teachers, therapists, physical therapists, occupational therapists, chiropractors, naturopathic physicians. I highlight all of the different disciplines, all of the different types of therapy that's really available. Most people don't recognize and don't see or don't know about some of the therapies that are available to our children. So it's, it's really, it's a whole menu of options for people.
That's great, because you mentioned a lot of people don't know. A lot of families obviously need the assistance, but they don't know where to turn, and they don't know how to ask. I'm sure some of the chapters in the book highlight, how to go about and navigate through some of those things, and I think that is a huge plus for families and individuals with differing disabilities. A lot of people, they're our audience, and they're looking, what 3 things would you say in this book that would really make somebody gravitate to it? 3 areas, maybe chapters within the book.
Well, it's my story with my son. So I think that it reads like a novel. People say, oh my God, I couldn't put it down. It's a fantastic book, and that my son's story is woven throughout all of the chapters. And then, I go into very specific protocols and treatments, things like changing his diet. I look back at old videotapes of Evan eating, food dyes and artificial ingredients and chemicals, and I didn't realize at the time how much that was contributing to some of his symptoms. So, one of the most important things is that we evaluate what we're putting into our children. We don't realize how many toxins we're pouring into their body every single day. The standard American diet, it's called SAD, it consists of chicken nuggets, French fries, macaroni and cheese, Skittles, and candy, and sugary soda and drinks. Parents don't recognize when you start looking up some of these ingredients, you realize, wow, not only is this causing hyperactivity, OCD, ADHD, anxiety, but it could also be causing things like cancer. And once you do that, you sort of forge ahead to say, well, I'm not going to give my children poison. And so, a little poison, maybe, but the problem is our kids are just eating way too much of it.
I would completely agree with you. It's almost with fast food in today's day and age, it's a convenience. Parents are working, and it's just an easy outlet for dinner, for lunch, things of that nature. But the important thing is you don't realize what you're putting in your body. So let's say, a family, 2 parents working in a 9 to 5, and they don't have the time, or they honestly just don't make the time to prep the food or make sure they know what they're highlighting. What are the first steps into really understanding what you're putting in your child's body? Like, let's say they were going to the grocery store. How do you read a label? What do you look for? What are some things that you recommend to stay away from? Things like that.
Well, there's a whole movement now with genetically modified foods. So things like corn syrup, soy. These foods are being genetically modified in a factory. They're using a lot of pesticides and herbicides to make the seeds for a certain produce. And so one of the things that's really destroying our intestinal system, which the book goes more into detail about how our gut is very connected to our brain. And there's actually more serotonin in our gut than in our brain.
Really? 95%. See, I would never have thought that.
Yes, 95% of our serotonin is actually in our gut. And so we don't recognize that it's the food we're eating. And so I would go to the grocery store, and you want to shop the perimeter of the grocery store.
Why is that?
Anything down the aisles, it's the healthiest, most whole food. You want your children to eat whole food, meat, protein. You want them to have fruits and vegetables, and things like that. And so when we look at an ingredients label, we should see, like, if there's more than 2 or 3 ingredients, it's probably a lot of stuff we can't even pronounce. All of those things that we can't pronounce is probably all chemical based. And what we're doing is we're just pouring more and more chemicals. And and I hear a lot of parents say, well, I just don't have the time. We have to change the whole mindset around, preparing our meals ahead of time, making it on Sunday and freezing it for the week if we have a baseball game or something going on. It's about planning, which a lot of parents, have a hard time doing. Some of them because they have ADD themselves and can probably use some of the same remedies. But we really have to get more into the habit of cooking. I take Hamburger Helper. Really, how much time are we saving? We still have to ground the beef. We still have to, cook the beef. We still have to boil the water. So the only thing we're doing differently is we're pouring a package of chemicals on it, instead of just going into the cabinet and grabbing cumin and turmeric and other things.
You're absolutely right. And it's funny because if you take a step back, we're all busy. I understand that. If you take a step back, just like you said, how much time are we actually saving? You have the time. It's just restructuring your day to if it takes an extra 10 minutes to get up in the morning, just like if you wanted to work out. I say I always want to work out, and I think of every excuse not to. So I guess it kind of falls in line with that. Great information. One thing I kind of wanted to dive back into is you mentioned your son's on the spectrum.
Yes.
When you first found out that your son was on the spectrum, what was your response? Let's talk to a family who just found this out. How do they react to this? how do they embrace it? Because
Right.
one thing that I've realized is some people think, I'm not going to say that they think that the child's life is over, but they think that
Right.
their life is drastically changed.
Right,
And
there's no hope.
There's no hope, and I don't
Right.
think that that's the case.
Right.
I think that there's how you live with it, and how you celebrate it to actually work to your advantage.
Right. And then you can actually act. So the problem with fear and no hope is that people just stopped acting. They stopped doing for their child, or they just don't know what to do, so they freeze. And so when I first got the diagnosis of pervasive developmental disorder, which is on the autistic spectrum, ADHD, OCD, I was in a bit of denial at first, and I think a lot of parents can recognize that in themselves. It's very difficult to get a diagnosis like this. And so when the child's 3 or 4 or 5, you say, well, and the pediatricians will say, oh, he's just a boy. Oh, he's, all kids develop differently. And so, but as a mom, we know intuitively that something else is really wrong. So once you can embrace the reality of what the situation is, my feeling is, and then I had to do something about it. Like, I'm not the type of person that could just sit back and say, oh, okay, so this is a lifelong disability, and so let's move on. And that's where my investigative work came in. My aunt was really helpful in this, in that she told me that there were alternative treatments for these disorders. At first, I took her advice very lightly. She never had children. She was a little bit of a health nut. I thought maybe she was a little crazy. But the reality is, once I started paying attention to what she was saying and finding the right physicians that would listen to me, a lot of mainstream physicians, unfortunately, are not schooled in naturopathic medicine, are not schooled in nutrition. We're lucky if most of our physicians get an hour of nutrition education. This is a problem. There is no collaboration between what the doctors knew yesterday and what the doctors are learning in their textbooks that are written by pharmaceutical companies today. There's a real disconnect.
There's two things that you just mentioned that I kind of want to highlight.
Yeah.
The first thing is you said that at first it was a denial for you as a parent.
Right.
And I would say that that's normal. Not my child, not my child.
Right.
But from what I hear when I interview or work with people in the field, that the quicker that you embrace it,
right,
and you put your child in scenarios where they can work on their differences and celebrate them, the better off they are.
Right.
I was actually reading an article that some parents, and I'm not saying all, but I was surprised at this, some people are wondering whether they should let their child know that they are diagnosed with autism.
Right.
And it sounds like you're on the same page with me by saying, the earlier the better, celebrate it, and let's move forward.
Right, absolutely. I mean, did I ever sit down and say, now, Evan, you have this diagnosis called autism? Well, no, of course not. But he's not stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, he knows he's in special ed classes. He knows that he's different than some of his typical peers. Although, now he's embracing those things. We're celebrating those things. And I say, Evan, there's apples and there's oranges, and you can't compare the two. And, everyone has some kind of disability, no matter, if it's anxiety or whatever.
Absolutely.
And the more we realize that everybody probably is on a spectrum somewhere, we can just take the stigma out of it. It's not the end of the world. It is what is, and we just work at helping the best way we can. And people say, well, are you curing him? Are you curing other children? Well, some children lose their diagnosis altogether. So if that's curing them, okay. Other kids just live happier, healthier, more well-adjusted lives. That's what we want. We want them to have a good self-esteem and like themselves and, find their gifts. Every child has a gift. So what is that? For Evan, he has a very good EQ. His ability to socialize and gab, now that we've done a lot of the treatment we've done, is unbelievable. I mean, he's a special kid. He beams light and love. He's going to be something great. I don't know what, but he'll do something.
That's really, really, really great to hear.
Yeah.
Actually, I hear a lot of times that the social aspect of somebody on the spectrum is difficult. So you're saying that he's conquered that and excelling.
Yeah, he was a kid that gave hardly any eye contact, wasn't speaking full sentences because he had something called apraxia, which is a motor planning problem. He had a lot of difficulty with speech and communication. And since we did a lot of these things, that was one of the things that I think has been the most improved, actually, is his ability. His true personality has come out. He's witty, he's funny, he tells jokes. That's where his intelligence lies.
Yeah.
Like he has an amazing ability to connect with people, to make them feel good. So who knows? I mean, he says he wants to be a childhood doctor. Maybe he'll be a naturopath. Maybe he'll be a physical therapist. Who knows what he'll be? But I could see he's already like that helping kind of personality. So
well, exactly. And one thing I always like to mention, and ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if it's true, but I did read that Dan Aykroyd is on the spectrum, and he actually praised being on the spectrum, saying that if he was not on, he doesn't think he could have written Ghostbusters, which I'm a huge fan of Ghostbusters. So thank you for being on the spectrum, Dan Aykroyd. If that is true, don't quote me. One thing I also wanted to go back to is you mentioned that a lot of times there's no connection between doctors now and actually seeing the transformation or the new knowledge of people on the spectrum.
Right.
It tends to see that in our culture that the first thing to do is write a script, and you're never healed. It's just masking what is going on.
Right. We're just masking symptoms.
So,
Because what's happening is we're addressing the emotional component of this disorder without looking at the physical manifestations of this disorder. A lot of the children on the spectrum also have dark circles under their eyes. They're shiners. They have food sensitivities or allergies. A lot of them have gut issues, constipation and tummy troubles, and they have very, very picky eaters because of that. And so very often, they may have eczema all over their body, but the problem is the doctors are just looking with a single focus lens. Like my son was always sick with ear infections, and I needed all these, surgeries, which actually caused more problems, actually. And it's interesting because all the doctors were just sort of looking one focus lens, like they were just looking at one organ at a time or one problem at a time and not really putting all the pieces together. So it really wasn't until we had a whole holistic approach that the doctor started saying, well, he has this and this and this is interesting, and this is all connected.
It's really surprising. Why do you think that doctors, you said pharmaceutical companies, and I'm not going to say that we know the answer, but is it a back-end money, would you say? Like, why is it that people are so, if the information is there, and I'm not going to say that everything is 100% accurate, but why not try all these different things and kind of marry them together to see what you get? Why are so many doctors afraid to do it or not doing it?
Right. Well, I think in a perfect world, we would mix Western and Eastern medicine. I think Western medicine is amazing. Like, if you have a heart attack or if you need to, fix a broken bone, and lots of other advances in some medicines that have been very, very important to keep people alive. I mean, so we don't want to discredit that.
Yeah.
At the same time, like you said, there really needs to be an integration. And why there isn't, again, is I think, we've kind of threw out what was tried and true. I mean, I found a book in my basement from my husband's great-grandfather. It was a medical book, and all the remedies that we did with Evan were in there. So what that suggests is that the doctors yesterday knew this stuff. They used terms like bound bowels and deranged minds, but they talked about the importance of detox, and they talked about why we needed magnesium because it was the anti-stress mineral. Children today, people today are completely deficient in magnesium. Magnesium is one of the most important minerals for brain health. So even just doing an investigation into finding out what are some of these nutritional deficiencies that people have, that if, people with OCD very often have a vitamin B deficiency, and they use the right form of the B vitamin and they take it early in the morning, and their OCD is significally improved.
Mental note on that.
Mental note on that for you. And I was actually thinking of you when I was saying that.
Thank you.
But so many other things that really could be helped, basically if they did. And I think, again, pharmaceutical companies write the textbooks.
Yeah, okay.
So of course, that's the doctors are trained, and I think, if you need surgery or you need meds, that mainstream doctors are fantastic. But there is an emerging field of functional medicine doctors, integrative doctors, MDs, that are actually going to medical school and then extending their research, extending their education to include homeopathy remedies, to include the nutritional component, to start recognize the person as a whole person, body, mind, and spirit, and not just a set of symptoms.
That's great to hear, because before the show, before we were taping, we met at Starbucks, and you mentioned actually, and it was shocking to hear that most medical doctors go to school and they don't really talk about these, not natural, but back in the day remedies or other alternate ways.
Right.
They just talk about more of the pharmaceutical avenue.
Right.
That's shocking.
And we're all biochemistry. It's all about balance. Balance of our nutrients, balance of our hormones, balance, and all of these can come back into balance with plant medicine. What people don't recognize is that medicine that we call medicine is actually plant-derived. They might take a dandelion root, which, by the way, is really good for detox and really good for your liver to cleanse it. They may take that, give it to a laboratory, create a synthetic concoction of what we can get in the ground to, for 1/10 the price. All the chemicals create a lot of side effects. it's time we go back to the root, to the plant, to the stem, the thing that actually creates the medicine in the first place.
It kind of makes me laugh. You ever see the commercials now? There's always a pill, a commercial.
For everything.
And it's, you have a runny nose. Right. Take a pill. Your arm falls off. Your leg will go numb.
And you could die.
You're going to die, but your nose will be fine when you're dead.
Right.
It's
right.
crazy.
It is crazy. And I noticed that they use very beautiful music in the background, and it looks so beautiful. I mean, they do a very good job at marketing these things.
It's kind of like the cigarette commercials where they find people working out and running on the beach. Everybody's sexy and looking great, and then 30 years down the road, you don't want to be smoking those cigarettes.
Right, exactly. Like one thing, I remember working with a psychiatrist. A lot of people got diagnosed with restless leg syndrome. The legs would just move in their sleep, and most often iron deficiency.
Huh. You've mentioned like 3 or 4 homemade remedies,
right?
Where people could just run and pull it out of the ground. Don't do that. I'm kidding around.
Actually, it would be good to do, except there's pesticides all over the
so be careful.
So don't eat them.
Yeah. So actually, one thing I wanted to mention, obviously, ladies and gentlemen, you want to listen to your physician, but you want to see if you can marry some things to assist with the transformation or working on a certain issue that may be occurring as of right now. So can you give me, maybe not a rundown, but a few simple things that somebody could also try and marry with the medication they're taking?
Well, I definitely recommend that anybody that's on medication never just stop taking medication. Obviously, if you're going to get off, you want to make sure it's done safely and correctly with your doctor. But it's okay to include a naturopathic physician, for example, in the fold with your Western treatment. Because very often, we may need a steroid for a short amount of time because of inflammation. It's one of the best drugs out there for that, but it has tons of side effects. So a naturopath could actually give you a homeopathy remedy to kind of counteract some of the side effects. So even if you have to take a medication, there might be things to support the body in healing while we're taking the medication. Some people need chemotherapy. Mm-hmm. Well, we need to be doing things to detox the liver while we're poisoning ourselves to kill the cancer.
Yeah.
There really should be a holistic approach right behind it to say, well, what are we doing to support the immune system, to support our liver while we're putting these toxins in our body? So I often suggest, now if you're going to be doing work to try to do natural with autism and ADHD, for example, a naturopathic physician can do a whole battery of testing, a lot deeper than most physicians will test. And so I recommend that people seek these people out. They could do, it's a simple urine test, could tell you what your neurotransmitter levels are like. Is it perfect science? No, but no lab work is. But it gives us a good marker. Well, where are the hormone levels? A urine test, simple. Blood work could show if a child has a food sensitivity. My daughter had a tremendous amount of rage, and after we did what we did with Evan, even though she was neurotypical, it didn't seem spectrum, she did have anxiety and rage issues. This isn't normal in a 5-year-old. 5-year-olds, that live in a healthy, somewhat quiet household shouldn't be raging.
Yeah.
Dairy was a huge, huge, huge trigger for her. She would have ice cream and she would turn into a girl I didn't recognize. And so, again, naturopathic physicians, other doctors could really start looking at some of the blood work, do deeper testing, and actually they have a different set of eyes when they even look at blood work that traditional doctors will test for. So it's very interesting.
No, good to know.
Yeah.
We have about 5 more minutes left.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you did all these things with Evan and your family, right?
Absolutely.
So if somebody wanted to get more information, obviously first read the book,
Yeah.
Follow your journey, your son's journey.
Yeah.
Is there a website that people can access some more information about you?
Yeah, I have 2 websites. On Your Path to Healing. .com is my therapy website.
Okay.
And then healingwithouthurting.com is actually more information about the book, about my work, about what got me to do this. I treated a lot of first responders of Sandy Hook Elementary School.
Okay.
And it was really out of the angst of that I really felt like our children were not getting the services that they needed. It wasn't made available as far as learning what other things could we do to help these kids that are in all this OCD and rage. And this isn't okay for children to be feeling this way. And when we say about saving time with processed food, how much time a family could save if they didn't have to deal with a temper tantrum every 5 seconds.
That's a great point.
Right? I mean, so you trade one for the other. You do the work. It takes work. This isn't a quick fix. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of parents, unfortunately, because of time restraints, they just want someone to just fix my child. And again, it's not really fixing. It's just band-aiding a symptom. And we're never really addressing the root cause,
Yeah.
And what people don't recognize too is that we're potentially warding off worse autoimmune disorders down the road. I really do feel that autism is an autoimmune disorder. The body starts sort of attacking itself. The immune system is compromised. Our guts, our house of our immune system, are inflamed. Our children aren't absorbing the nutrients that they need to absorb. They're eating all the wrong things. And so there's definitely things that we can do with work to get them back. And there's also tons of therapies we could do, chiropractic care.